Tony Parker, one of the greatest point guards of all time. A player who was a huge part of the Spurs' success over the last 2 decades. In some years, he was even their best player, but like with pretty much any Spurs player who's not Tim Duncan, they're perceived very strangely. How's it going, fellas? My name's Andy, and with Parker joining the Charlotte Hornets, I thought it'd be a good time to talk about his career and how good he was during his prime. But before we start, I'd like to give a shout out to my sponsor, SeatGeek. SeatGeek is an app that aggregates ticket prices from all over the web to help you find the best deals for games, concerts, Broadway shows, and other events. The prices marked in green are good, while the ones in red are bad. I used the app to buy tickets to a Knicks game last year, and the process was very smooth. You can also see the view from your seats before you buy them, so that's awesome. Use my promo code ANDY at checkout to get $20 off your first purchase. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video. Alright, let's get started. Now, when it comes to all-time rankings or all-time point guard rankings, Parker is, ranked very inconsistently. He could very well be a top 10 point guard of all time, but others put him nowhere close to that level because, well, he played most of his career with the best power forward of all time. That's a huge advantage to have, and yet, that same advantage hurts his own individual perception. Some say that Parker would be nowhere near as good if he didn't have Duncan taking the pressure off of him. And there's some truth to that, but I think it's incorrect for the most part. First, let's take a look at Parker's accolades. He's a 6-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA, the 2007 Finals MVP, and a 4-time champion. For the majority of the 2005-06 season, he led the league in points in the paint, which was absurd for a 6'2" point guard. No point guard in NBA history has led the league in points in the paint before. Throughout his entire career, that has been the best part of Parker's game. In his prime, he was incredibly good at getting to the rim and finishing in the paint, equipped with, in my opinion, the best floater in NBA history. I don't even think it's close. Parker's floater is the best ever, and I think it's beautiful to watch. He worked on and perfected the move very early in his career and made it mainstream. Other point guards started to adopt the floater and use it more often because they realized it was a great option to have. If there's a big man in the paint trying to block your shot, you need some way to score the ball, and the floater became the best option. Parker was never an exceptional athlete to begin with when it comes to jumping or contorting his body in midair like a Derrick Rose or Russell Westbrook. He was a rather average-sized point guard with average strength and physical tools. So that's why the floater became so important to him. He needed that move to score. On top of that, Parker's passing skills have become somewhat underrated. He was never a flashy passer, nor was he ever considered a top passer in the league, but he was solid. Coming into the league at just 19 years old, Coach Popovich was infuriated with Parker's style of play. He tried to mold Parker into becoming a pure point guard because that's what the team needed. Instead, they got a score-first, erratic young player who was out of control a lot. Over the years though, the team accepted Parker and the way he played the game. He slowly became a better passer at his own pace and became more willing to find the open man, instead of just playing like an undersized shooting guard. However, with all of Parker's exceptional skill in the paint, he had a lot of weaknesses in his game. Early on in his career, he was not a great shooter at all, and while he did get better as he got older, his poor shooting used to cost the Spurs a lot of games. In the playoffs, there were times when opponents would sag off of him to double-team Tim Duncan. It was really easy to do because Parker was not a threat from the outside, so defenders can double and then quickly recover. This hurt the Spurs a lot, especially against teams like the Lakers, who had more star power and great perimeter defenders. Another issue was Parker's defense. He was never known as a lockdown defender, and he had his fair share of lapses. But the thing is, his mediocre defense did not hurt the team as much because he had Tim Duncan in the back, anchoring the paint. So any player who blows by Parker would probably get stopped at the rim anyway. It was a great luxury to have, and it allowed him to go all out offensively as he led the Spurs in scoring for 5 different seasons. As the years progressed, his defense and his shooting would get better. He never took many threes, and he still doesn't, but his mid-range shots improved a lot. For the first 7 seasons of his career, he shot 36% between 10 and 16 feet, and in his next 7 seasons, he averaged 42%. It's still not an efficient way to score, but it helps keep the defense on their feet. They can't just leave Parker wide open anymore like they used to. So, how good was Tony Parker actually? I'd rank him as a borderline top 10 point guard of all time, probably a bit outside of it. Despite all of his individual accomplishments and team success, he still gets the unfair treatment of, well, he played with Tim Duncan. Any point guard could play with Tim Duncan, and he would have been exposed without him. Yeah, people actually say that. And that's why Parker's all-time ranking is always inconsistent, depending on who you talk to. Every time you bring up Parker, somebody else is going to bring up Duncan. And I think that discredits how good Parker really was. His best season was probably the 2012-13 season, where he averaged 20 points per game, nearly 8 assists, made the All-NBA team, and led the Spurs to the finals, which was really surprising at the time. Very few thought they would make the finals that year. He also hit a game winner in the finals. As an individual player, he was really good. One of the best scoring and slashing point guards of all time. During an era where a lot of other guards were just chucking up shots, Parker was pretty efficient, having multiple seasons of shooting over 50%. He deserves a lot more credit than just being thought of as Duncan's sidekick. He was indeed the best player on the Spurs for a couple of years after Duncan started to decline and before Kawhi became a star. I'd argue that he was the best player on the Spurs when they reached the finals in 2013 and 2014. Looking at his career stats, nothing stands out or would suggest that he was anything more than a fringe all-star. But in his prime, he had multiple 18 to 20 point seasons and was arguably the best point guard in the league for a few years. And that's the magic word, arguable. A word that was made for Parker. His entire career is an argument. There's an argument that he was the best point guard for a long time, but you could also say he clearly wasn't. And if you put any other all-star point guard with Tim Duncan, they'd win just as many championships. Either of these opinions could be reasonably argued. Also, I guess some fans don't like him because he had some off-court drama. He brought the drama to the Spurs before Kawhi made it cool. Anyway, that's all folks. Parker used to be an incredible player, but where would you guys rank him all time as a point guard? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.